Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Kansas City big band leader, trombonist, and educator Marcus Lewis. His journey began in Augusta, Georgia, with a stop at the University of Nebraska for a master's degree, then on to New York City to live his dream. But after his wife got a job offer in Kansas City, he came this way, and he's been here for 3 years. Along with writing charts on a regular basis, he's toured with Kansas City, Kansas native and star Janelle Monae, and has started a very cool after-school program of jazz education and teaching improv to kids called Future Jazz. He's got a great jazz road etched so far, and the plans to keep it going into the future are well underway. Dig this interview, my friends.
First of all, thank you for taking a little time to talk with me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem, man. I'm just glad you thought of me to interview, so awesome.
Right on. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in here, and I want to get kind of a snapshot of, I know you've been out with Janelle Monae. I want to get an idea of what kind of activity has been going on with you lately.
Well, yeah, aside from doing, one-offs with Janelle right now, I'm also, a lot of my time has been put into starting of a nonprofit for jazz education for kids, and it's called Future Jazz. Essentially, it's an after-school jazz program that focuses on jazz education, anything from, learning sight reading, learning how to improvise, jazz history, jazz theory. We do 2 performances at least per semester. And so, yeah, I've been spending a lot of time doing that, and then also just doing a few arrangements for people and doing gigs here and there with my small group and my big band.
Man, that is amazing, the amount of good that you're going to do with these kids for the future. They always talk about jazz is such a big thing that's lacking in some of these schools, so that's great. That's beautiful. So let me go ahead and get an idea. Your last album, official album that you released was Facing East, correct?
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about that album and kind of the afterglow. Is there another one in the works? How was this album responded? What did you do to tour and promote it? Just kind of an idea of Facing East.
Okay, yeah, Facing East recorded, I think it was back in 2012. And so it's definitely time to do another one. It's essentially just all original music. There's no standards on it. All original music, and it featured the band that I played with when I lived in New York, which Kansas City native Logan Richardson's on it. Sam Harris is on piano. Aiden Carroll is on bass. Tommy Crane is on drums. Adam Larson saxophone, and Pablo Macis is playing trumpet on a few tracks. My goal with that was to get my debut record out and have it be all original music. I did a little bit of touring with it. I did some things on the East Coast and then also in the Midwest. I never really made it out to the West Coast because I've lived on the East Coast and lived in the Midwest. Those are kind of my areas where I have the connections to get gigs and to put tours together and things, like to go into a few schools and play and then go, to playing at a jazz club or a restaurant or something like that. I did that and just a lot of self-promotion. Also, a few festivals, small jazz festivals that I did. But other than that, just self-promotion and a little bit of touring here and there with it, but not, we didn't go on like a 3-month tour or anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of roots and the East Coast, you grew up in Augusta, Georgia. Give me an idea about your childhood there that gave you this love of jazz.
Oh, man, that's a great question. So I grew up in a town, actually, I was born in Augusta, Georgia, but the town I grew up in is about 30 minutes away from that, and it's a small town called Waynesboro, Georgia. It's a, really small rural town in Georgia. There's maybe to give you kind of an idea of the size, there's maybe 2 or 3 traffic lights on the main street there. So really small town. Came through the band program, started playing trombone in 6th grade. Just was, into band music and really, really into that. And I was going to be, by like the 9th grade, I decided that I was going to be a band director, teach band. My band director, Ken Hudlow, when I was a junior, he started talking to me. He was like, yeah, you know, you have a really good ear. Because he was a really good teacher. He would always, like, stop and ask us, like, oh, what type of chord are we playing? Like, hold this out. And, you know, people would be like, oh, this is a major chord, this is a minor chord, this is augmented, this is, you know, whatever it was. So I was always raising my hand, and he was like, man, you have a really good ear, you know, blah, blah, blah. You know, do you listen to jazz? And I was like, no, not really. I didn't really listen to jazz. I grew up listening to, like, you know, pop on the radio, pop music, R&B, like all the old Motown stuff, like basically stuff that my parents listened to. He told me about J.J. Johnson. And so I went out and bought a J.J. Johnson CD. It was the Eminent Volume 1, and started listening to it, and I was like, man, this is amazing. I didn't know the trombone could do this. This is so cool. Like, this is what I want to do. Forget the band director stuff. Like, I want to be able to do that and express myself like this guy could. So then I, you know, started getting into jazz, listening to, you know, all the greats, you know. Just started doing my own research because, I mean, there's, you know, in a town like that, there's no place where you can go and listen to jazz. You know what I mean?
Right.
So started getting into that, and then I you know, auditioned for this program in Georgia that we have called Governor's Honors Program. And it's basically you have a concentrated study and you audition, and out of all the kids in Georgia, and they select maybe like 2 people on your instrument. And so I got into this program for jazz. And so you study jazz at a college during the summer while all the other kids, you know, are off for the summer. You're doing intense study at a university. And it just happened to be at Valdosta State University, and that's where I ended up going to college. So, yeah, a very, very late start into jazz. I wasn't one of those kids that, you know, had parents that listened to jazz, and, you know, I had a early exposure to it. So I got a late start into jazz.
Yeah, that's good, though. I mean, a lot of people, you know, it's about finding your calling.
Yeah.
So you go from Valdosta to the University of Nebraska and get a master's degree in trombone. What brought you to the University of Nebraska?
Okay, so, yeah, I was studying at Valdosta State, and the trombone teacher, Dr. Pete Matson from University of Nebraska, was doing a master class at my school. And so, you know, you would play for him, and then he would give compliments, things you could work on. After I got done playing, he kind of pulled me aside, and he was like, what are you doing? Are you a senior? And I was like, yeah, I'm a senior. He's like, what are you doing? And after school? And I was like, I'm not really sure. I'm thinking about maybe moving to New York. I'm thinking of looking at schools to maybe, you know, get my master's. You know, I haven't really made a firm decision. And so he was like, well, you know, I have a teaching assistantship at my school. And he was like, I really think you should audition for it. I'd love to have you there. Drove out to Nebraska and auditioned and looked at a few other schools. But at the time, I felt like it was the best fit for me because what they really wanted me to do was kind of to like help start the jazz program there and be like really involved in the teaching side of it as well as, you know, playing in jazz ensemble and the combos and all of that. So it just seemed right to me at the time. So.
Well, and then you mentioned that you were in New York for some time and you end up in Kansas City. Give me kind of a timeline of where you went, how you finally came to Kansas City, and what brought you here.
I left Nebraska. I graduated there in 2003. And then I was going to move to New York. I've always wanted to be in New York. And so I didn't really have the money, though, because, as you know, New York is super expensive. So I decided to just, like, what is a way that I can make money for a short period of time and not, you know, be tied down to, like, a real job or something like that. So I decided to audition for cruise ships. And I did that for a year and a half to save up some money, and ended up, I was the musical director for a few ships for Royal Caribbean cruise lines. And then, so moved to New York, was there. And then actually in between New York and Kansas City, I was in Atlanta for like 5 years. And Atlanta, you know, I moved from New York because I made a lot of good connections in New York, and I had a really good time. But for me, it was like, I started to weigh the cost of living there versus my experience, and it was just too expensive. I didn't want to like live the rest of my life living, paycheck to paycheck and just, really struggling just to say, I live in New York and I'm playing jazz and, the whole ego thing. So decided to move back to Georgia because that's where all my friends were that I graduated from school with. Like, they had moved to Atlanta and they were band directors or, freelancers. So I knew I had a lot of connections there. So my wife and I moved, well, she was my fiance at the time, but we moved to Atlanta. And then I was kind of on the scene there. And then, so once I got in Atlanta, my first like really big touring gig I got was with the Ohio Players. And it's a, old 70s funk band. I don't know if the song Roller Coaster and like Fire.
Yeah.
So I toured with them for 2 years and then got hooked up with Janelle's group. I was touring with Janelle, living in Atlanta. And then, so we were thinking about, my wife was, she's from Omaha. That's where I met her when I was out there. And, so since I'm on the road a lot, she was, wanting to be a little bit closer to home. And I was looking for a place with a really good jazz scene, but not New York. And, so we kind of decided on Kansas City. She ended up, what was the kind of, sealing the deal was, she ended up getting a job offer, strangely, from Kansas City. She submitted her resume to one company and ended up, they sent it to the company in Kansas City. So it was kind of a weird thing. It's kind of like it was meant to be.
Absolutely.
So been in Kansas City now for 3 years, and it looks like we're going to stick around. We like it there.
Right on. So let me get an idea. So you were in the cauldron of jazz in New York City. You played at the Kennedy Center. You played at the Grammys. Was there a venue in specific in New York, since that was kind of your dream place that you played, like the first time you were like, wow, this is amazing?
In New York, I really, I never played at like Village Vanguard or Birdland. I never got a gig in any of those places. Like I played a place called Sweet Rhythm, played at the Garage. I played at a bar uptown called the Piper's Kilt. I played at Cleopatra's Needle. I played at Smoke. It wasn't until I moved away from New York that I actually got a gig in New York. I was like, wow, I did a big band gig with the singer that I was doing arrangements for. He's a singer, trombone player, Saunders Sermons, and we played the Blue Note. So that was like, man, I was like, I'm actually playing the Blue Note in New York. So that was at the moment I was like, wow, that's pretty awesome.
Absolutely. Well, and speaking of big deals, you've performed with a lot of big shots, like Janelle Monae, Bruno Mars, Aretha Franklin, the list goes on. What do you learn from those people that have so much history, that are veterans of the stage, that have so much clout? What do you get from that experience?
To be honest, it's always, for me, just being, from a small town, but always thinking like, I just always just figured I was going to be, doing something like touring and playing on TV. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I always had this feeling. And the thing that I gather most from them is, well, it's different things, but if I could group everybody into one thing, it would be just like that their drive and determination, and that these people are just normal people, because, we like to think that sometimes people are just, like superhuman beings because they've achieved this level of great success. But as you meet and talk to people, and they're just regular people who love music and are very passionate about what they do, and they're very driven. So like when you're around people like that, it kind of, rubs off on you. The times where you're just, tired from the road and sitting around and not really being productive, and then you see them, working, it's like, oh man, I got to get it together here,
Well, let me ask you this. Who has taught you the most about music?
Oh man, I've never been asked that before, and that's a great question. Recordings have taught me the most about music, more than anything I've ever learned sitting in a class, just like studying recordings and, transcribing, things, figuring out things on your own. And that's kind of like what I promote in my after school program is, I can only give you so much knowledge, all the knowledge that I have, but the moments that really stick in your life are moments of self-discovery where you're like, oh, so this is how you play a 2-5-1, or oh, this is how, you do, or this is how you write a song, those things. And then I would say if learning from people, there's not like really one person. I think it's just like my peers that, when you play a gig with people, like you're constantly learning from them because you have your own concept and approach to music. And hopefully the people that you're playing with, their concepts align with yours, but their approach is always different because they're an individual, so they have their own thing happening. And so I'm constantly always learning from the musicians that I gig with. We always talk about moments of self-discovery and, from, being like, oh, this is how this rhythmic idea, this is how you make it a part of your vocabulary or whatever, or this harmonic thing or this melodic concept or whatever. So I would say the real answer is from recordings, but also almost just as much from my peers.
So let me ask you this. You mentioned J.J. Johnson. Are there anybody else that you would consider your jazz heroes?
Yeah, of course, all the guys like Charlie Parker, Coltrane, Miles, Dizzy Gillespie, all those guys that every jazz musician that you ever interview would say. Also, on the trombone, so I really got into J.J., but my guy from like the older generation would have to be Slide Hampton. And then I really like Wayne Shorter as far as, just being a total. I think Wayne Shorter is like the definition of what a musician is. He has this great span of work and it's all constantly moving forward. He never, you have people that have careers that do music that literally sounds the same, no matter what time period they're in. Wayne is always being like ahead of like everyone. He's a very smart guy, but he also comes from a place of like being truly honest when he's playing. He's like my favorite musician. I really like Dave Holland. I really like the way he writes. Some of my writing is, I've learned a lot from just studying Dave Holland's music. And I really like Brian Blade, this new modern drummer. He's one of those guys that's really close to Wayne Shorter as far as just coming from a place of pure honesty. And like, that's what I think we have to do, especially if you're playing jazz and trying to tell your story. You got to come from a place of honesty, or if you don't, I think people hear that and they wouldn't want to listen to you. So.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this. You may have answered the question. If you could go back in time and see any musician live, who would you go see and where would you go?
Even though Wayne Shorter is my favorite musician, because he's still living and I've seen him numerous times, I would say if I had to go back, it would have to be Coltrane's quartet with Jimmy Garrison, Elvin Jones, McCoy Tyner, and Train. I mean, just to experience Train live, I think would be a crazy experience. So, like at the Village Vanguard, all those recordings he did like in '61 on Impulse, like all that. It would be great to see that.
Let me ask you this. Why do you love jazz? You dedicated your life to the jazz craft, but tell me, why do you love it?
Why do I love jazz? Because for me, I got the idea that jazz early on was like being like free. I like jazz because I can literally just, however I'm feeling, I can be myself. And that's a really hard thing to do. You may get in different social situations or whatever. You have to like compromise yourself sometimes just to like be social or whatever. But with jazz, it's like there's a compromise there, but there's really tough, especially if you're playing with people that you trust. It's like a very liberating experience. It's like being free. We live in America and we're told that we're free. We're not. That's kind of an ideal. We're not really free. But I feel like when you're playing jazz, it's like you're totally free to do whatever you want. And it's like the greatest form of self-expression in music to me is jazz. So I'm the type of person that really likes to be able to express myself. So that's why I'm drawn to jazz, like, immediately, more than anything else.
That's a great answer. Let me ask you this. Is there anything on the horizon, maybe an album, any projects, anything that would be you'd like to mention that's on the radar?
Yeah, so I've got music composed for a new album that hopefully in the fall of this year, I'm trying to release it. It may be early 2017, but I'm trying to do it in the fall of this year. But the music's already composed, and I've already pretty much figured out who I'm going to use on the recording. I'm also trying to do a big band album. I don't know if you've heard, but I do have a big band in Kansas City of all original music as well. So I'm trying to also release a big band album coming early 2017. Continuing to arrange and write for that. I already have enough music to do an album. It's just to have more options. So, and to do a big band album is pretty expensive. So, trying to save up for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Give me a history of your big band. It's a great sound, and I'm curious as to the history of it. You just talked about what's on the horizon, but talk to me a little bit about how this came about.
Yeah, so the big band idea came about. I've always, for whatever reason, been interested in arranging. The only real formal arranging that I took in college was I took a semester of Jazz Arranging 101 from David Springfield at Augusta State, who is an extremely talented arranger, and I learned so much from him because he gave me all the class curriculum, but he saw I was really into it, so he was always giving me extra stuff to check out and work on. Aside from that, I didn't really study arranging. It was also just transcribing recordings and listening and doing that. And so while I worked for Royal Caribbean as a musical director, a lot of the charts on the cruise ship charts, and no offense to anyone, but they were really bad charts. I was like, man, I could either try to get some money to hire somebody to write charts, which I knew wouldn't happen, or I could just do it myself and have some really decent charts to play. And it would be a learning experience for me. So I would just write charts for the band, a lot of trial and error, a lot of listening, a lot of studying. And so then I really got into arranging. I was like, man, we were playing the charts and people were like, oh man, these charts are great, man. So that felt really good. So I've always kind of dabbled in arranging and been into that. To get to the answer to your question, David Springfield, the guy who I studied arranging from, he's head of the jazz department at Valdosta State, where I went to school, and he contacted me about doing an alumni concert, and he wanted to feature me with the big band at Valdosta State, and so he's like, yeah, you got any tunes that you want to play? And then he was like, I was like, yeah, I can do some standard stuff, and blah, 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 and he's like, man, no, I just listened to your album. He was like, do you have any big band arrangements of that stuff? Because that would be killing to play that stuff with a big band. And I was like, no, I don't. And then he was like, well, why don't you just do 3 or 4 tunes? You think you can arrange 3 or 4 tunes of your original music and play it with a big band, and then we'll do a couple of standard things? And so I was like, yeah, I was a little reluctant because I'm like, man, I don't know if I'm ready to do that. And so I did it, and the reception was really great of all the tunes. The kids were really excited about it, and so it just gave me more confidence to pursue that. And so from that point, I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to keep doing arrangements of these tunes, and kind of keep with my thing of doing most of the original music, and start a big band in Atlanta. And so I got a book of about 15 tunes, and we started playing, 2 set gigs around town, and it just kept adding to the book and adding to the book and adding to the book. And so it was really fun. We do a festival in Atlanta every year called Music in the Park. And so when I moved to Kansas City, I just continued and met a lot of musicians here and formed a Kansas City unit for the big band, which is some of the best players in Kansas City, and it's been really fun. And so now the book, I maybe have about 40 tunes in the book now. So I've just been doing that a little by little over the past 3 to 4 years.
Right on. So let me ask you this. Everybody has a version of who you are. Your family does, your friends do, your fans do. those you work with, but who do you think you are?
Wow, man, you have like really amazing questions, and some of them that I've never been asked before. So this is really cool. I'm a guy that really loves music and really cares about the human race, and I try to like put that love for music and just mankind like through in my music. And I always try to think of a place, or whenever I'm inspired by something, it's usually like a moment in life where there's been like a connection with another human being, or like an act of kindness, or sometimes not even an act of kindness. It could be something negative too. So I'm just a guy who really loves music, really has hope for mankind to be the best that we can be. I know that's frustrating sometimes, but and also just trying to do what I can to like bring people together. I just try to be as honest as I can. I'm like, because like in this business, there's a lot of people who are honest, and there's a lot of people who are not honest, and it like comes out in their music, So I just, my music is just like a reflection of that. I'm a very competitive person. I grew up in a very competitive family. Grew up playing sports, so I'm like very competitive even in sports. I golf and I play ping pong, and so I like sports too, but I like to compete doing anything. So I'm a guy who loves mankind, but I don't like to lose. So.
Right on. That's awesome. That's a perfect way to wrap everything up. Thank you for taking some time out, and I look forward to seeing you on the scene at some point here in KC and listening to your sound. It'd be great.
Awesome. I really appreciate it, Joe.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the globe, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Marcus for his music, his vision, and making Kansas City more vibrant for the arts and education. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store, or visit theneonjazz.blogspot.com for all things Neon Jazz. Until next time, enjoy the music, my friends.
Neon Jazz.